Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, sponsored by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your podcast host. This podcast is committed to providing our viewers with insight regarding tools, techniques, and processes to assist any organization with enhancing their safety and culture. In addition, we'll routinely have featured guests. They're going to include industry leaders, authors, business owners. These series of guests will offer their perspective on many aspects of safety culture topics. Examples include leadership commitment, employee engagement, training, attrition, and many more. Yes, there is a lot of considerations regarding being able to develop and maintain a positive safety culture. Please help increase awareness of our podcast by clicking on the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Also encourage you to send us any questions you may have, topics like you'd see to be addressed in future podcasts, requests for feature guests, or other items of interest. You can reach us via our Safety Culture Solutions Facebook page, the Safety Culture Strategies website, www.scstrat.com, or via an email at mike@scstrat.com. Without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. With over 2 decades of proven executive and corporate development expertise, Dr. Magee is recognized as one of today's leading leadership and marketing strategists. To date, Jeffery has authored 32 books printed in 21 languages, 3 college and graduate management textbooks, and 4 bestsellers. He's also the publisher of Performance 360 magazine. Each edition contains exclusive success and achievement-focused articles from the world leaders in business, nonprofit, government, politics, sports, music, entertainment, authors, consultants, and professional coaches. Contributors have included the Dali Lama, Larry King, Richard Branson, Oprah Winfrey, Joel Osteen, former U.S. presidents, and numerous leaders in the U.S. military. Dr. Magee is also committed to the professional excellence for his clients and his ongoing certifications as well. Along with advanced degrees, he's a certified board executive, CBE, certified speaking professional, CSP, a certified management consultant, CMC, and a certified professional direct marketer, PDM. Former President George Bush and the U.S. National Guard recognized him with the high honor of the Total Team Victory and Freedom Award. By the way, the London Business Gazette has hailed Jeff as an American business guru, and I couldn't agree more. Dr. Magee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to my show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Michael. Just call me Jeffrey. We have a long-standing friendship.
Thank you, brother.
You're the elder on here. I should be calling you sir.
Good morning to you. So how's your day going so far, Os?
It's going great. Started at 5 a.m. As we're recording this for our viewers in the future, today. It's basically lunchtime Pacific time. And the day is not even halfway through. I still got another good 12 hours of life.
There he goes. And you're not one to slow your roll much. So when we talked about the different aspects and obviously listened to your bio and the intro, you've got a lot of time in the saddle, lots of accomplishments. So part of the goal that we want to do on this podcast is have takeaways, nuggets that people can remember. So we're going to frame a few conversations. One I always kind of like get intrigued with, on a daily basis, what's like the number one thing that you really want to make sure you put that thumbtack on the wall on every day?
You know, that's a great question. And it's also a point of conversation even with my own clients. And I think the answer to that is the word legacy. You know, again, not to be morbid, but none of us have any guarantee tomorrow is going to arrive. So therefore, I think what you put your thumb on each day is, legacy. What is it that you want to do? Who is it that you can help serve? How can you connect with someone within the wheelhouse of what you're all about? And if this was your last day on the planet, is that the Polaroid picture? Is that the iPhone video you would want someone to see of who you were and who you are? So I think legacy is the answer. I mean, what you do, that's it.
I like it being legacy, and that resonates so well. So it's kind of how would people remember you? Is that a good way to look at that?
And it is, because again, I think a lot of times people go off on different trajectories in answering a question like that may be specific, to the wheelhouse of safety, making sure you create the right climate and culture for people to be thinking and have a mindset of safety. Then that takes you to all the strategic and tactical aspects, or making sure that you're looking forward into the future. What do you do? Again, but those conversations, they can get really granular. There's a time for those conversations, but I think it backs up to, that's another example of legacy. Again, and then within my specific world of leadership and sales where I've lived, if I were to answer that question, then I may have a different response, but that response would still come back to legacy. So I think that number one thing people should really fixate on is what's your number one ask for the day, or what's your number one give for the day, or what's your number one accomplishment for the day. I think sometimes people get so busy and have so many things they're working on, nothing really ever gets done. And then in business, that can come back to haunt you in lots of ways.
Very good point. And this next question, it's really, these ones we'd crafted a long time ago. I learned from you and a lot of people I respect. And this one's, especially what everything is going on right now, the COVID-19, where for late breaking news, it appears we're moving forward with a vaccine over in England. They're starting to go forward. So in a few months, hopefully people look on this video and say, well, we've kind of figured our way forward. So in your world, Jeffrey, just where things haven't gone as well as you would have liked and you had to do a course correction, what type of tough decisions did you have to make to get things aimed back the way you truly wanted them to be?
That is a very powerful question, and I want to preface this very politely and respectfully, both to you and our listeners. So the time frame that we're talking about here is 2020. What course corrections did I need to make or address for my business in 2020 to be successful? The answer is frickin' nothing. Zero is the answer. And for almost all of my clients, no, every one of my clients, I was going to say almost all, but that's not even true. Every one of my clients, what they had to do in 2020 was nothing. They already had a game plan in January that was test vetted against unknowns. All that COVID is an unknown. And the reason so many people individually or their businesses got their butts kicked in 2020 is what I just said for 60 seconds. Their leaders were not leaders. They were basically stewards of a position in January and February 2020, and then what they were really doing was pulling 2019's game plan forward and executing it forward, and they were lying to themselves and everyone else that they had any clue what leadership is. They were not leaders. They were managers. Managers manage the status quo. Managers manage an SOP. Managers manage resources and what's expected because it's on the wall. There's a checklist. There's something in the computer. Leaders have vision, and that's always being benchmarked against values and goals, both immediate needs, intermediate needs, and long-term needs. And if we apply that to safety, the exact same thing. So what I found, ironically, as you asked that, in 2019, I spoke at a national conference of business professionals in one of the spaces where I live. And I shared with them, you need to have a written, not mentally, but written business plan that applies to your core market space and secondary and tertiary markets you could go after. You're always test vetting. What happens if my number one employee leaves, or my number one customer leaves, or the number one market segmentation I'm in leaves? And everyone laughed at that in essence had their butt kicked in 2020. Now, what I mean is that they didn't hear me seriously. And the people who were in that audience that listened all survived the sucker punch that happened in March when the world got shut down. And the people that actually listened to me had a game plan. So all that I did in 2020, me and my clients, was we adjusted the trajectory of what we were already doing that was working, that now because of COVID, we had to adjust some of our deliverables because the way we were doing them in January and February was being shut down, whether it was by the government or whether it was by our state or whether it was by businesses or whether it was because of individual concerns, anxiety, or stress. And we doubled down on what worked, and every one of them weren't just in survival mode. They were ahead of survival back into thrive. Every one of them. I have clients in agriculture, manufacturing, distribution, finance, the Army National Guard, and all the ones that were able to make that adjustment quickly and recognize what it takes to be successful were there. To me, it comes down to 3 words, 3 categories, 3 elements in business. And most business schools teach this. That's what's scary. But the problem is most people in a business school have never signed the front of a check. That's why what they were teaching really quickly became BS on March 18th. I keep using that date because it's clear in my head here in Las Vegas where I'm based. Front page of the newspaper on March 18th said, governor shutting down the state. Now, that's okay. Our governor's never had a real job, so he doesn't understand signing the front of a check and doesn't understand capitalism, so it's easy to shut those down. obviously you've just asked a very sensitive question I could go on with. But if you are an individual that had a game plan, then what's happened in 2020 hasn't freaked you out. Now, maybe you had to get a little bit more conservative in some of your decisions, actions, or how you manage your budget. Businesses that were very transparent and brought all of their employees together and say, look, here's our reality. What's the creative juices any of you have collectively for us to remain relevant to our customers? How do we help our customers to remain relevant? They all were able to maintain their jobs. But if you think this way, Michael, you can look at all kinds of businesses and see how sadly those individuals might have been very good subject matter experts in the specific area of their business, but they weren't really understanding how to do their business. And that's why so many people are in trouble in 2020 and are going to be in trouble in 21 unless they make the shifts that they need to be making.
You're right on target, and just one of the things I like being around Jeffrey is you're passionate, but overweight with all your knowledge. So the takeaway is, if you don't have a business plan now, it's probably contributing to some of your challenges, and you got to figure out how to get one pretty quickly because to help you grow. And real quick as a segue, I worked with a lot of companies where everybody's remoting in, and they're saying, well, how we maintain this good relationship with our staff. And I says, question, how did you maintain it with them when you were all in the building together? And sometimes you get that deer in the headlight look, and they're going, oh, so my takeaway for that brief discussion is that if you didn't have a strong relationship with your employees before COVID, it's just become more glaringly apparent. If you don't have a business plan, it becomes more glaringly apparent. So that's why I like these discussions, because you never know where stuff's going to go. So in this world, and even beyond COVID, leading into COVID, from a safety culture perspective at the leadership level. Because when you're talking to Jeffery, Magee, you're talking to leadership. What do you view as one of the most critical safety culture components for any given leader?
I think the key element of where I start, and you can inject any word you want here, but I think it starts with mindset, attitude. What's your attitude, grounding, core beliefs? How are you able to challenge yourself? What I'm finding in 2020 is a kind of an element I've used for 20 years, both in my programs with my own companies, my own employees, with clients, people that I engage and work as an advisor. And it really is this statement here, Michael. At what point are you willing to make a new decision that challenges your personal convictions and belief system? And when people are able to recognize at what point am I able to make a new decision based upon new facts, not rhetoric, new facts, not my opinion, new facts, not someone's hidden agenda, that can challenge my core belief systems because they need to be challenged, then we become more successful. And as a leader, that's a very critical concept and statement. But it goes back to attitudes. If we want to have a safety culture, it starts with a mindset. Do people understand this? Do people understand that if you are not paying attention, you slip and fall? But what's the next element? How could that impact you in terms of physically or mentally or your income earning ability? And then what's connected to that? If you're by yourself or you have people that depend upon you, if you, in essence, are not paying attention and you lose your hand, let's say you lose both hands, and boom, that's your nub. Well, imagine trying to grab things. How's that going to impact? Imagine being able to feel, your child at age 1 or your nephew, your niece, your grandchild because of a lack of safety, and recognizing that safety is not the safety department's responsibility. That's a compliance mindset, and you're an idiot. Safety is not the responsibility of a supervisor or the parent unless the child is under the age of 5. That's you're an idiot. Safety has to be ingrained in everyone's responsibility. It's sometimes the things we see on YouTube. I don't spend much time there, but I am very much engaged in LinkedIn because that's where my clients live. And every once in a while, I'll see a posting where, there's a person driving down the road on a motorcycle. And I'm sure if any of your viewers spend time on YouTube or LinkedIn, you'll see it because it's one I see pop up a lot, just even in recent years, where a motorist stops their car, pulls over the side of the road, gets out, it's safe, and they go and move some debris out of the middle of the road that everyone else is driving around about ready to cause accidents. See, that's the safety, self-responsibility attitude or mindset. It's the person that says, this is ridiculous. There's an elder man or woman trying to cross the street. And again, that could be me one day. That could be my mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. And they stop their car and they stop the traffic and someone else gets out and helps walk them across the street. See, that has nothing to do with work, but that's a safety mindset. If you believe in safety and it's a part of your attitudinal DNA at home, you're probably going to have it at work. And if it's really you at work, you're going to have it at home. And so we have to get people to recognize that the safety mindset is not something that's owned by the CEO. That's a given. It's not something that's owned by the newest person who just joined the company and therefore everyone in between. All of us own safety. And yes, it can also be then more owned by a specific business unit within an organization. Those, environmental health and safety professionals, we, let them become the SMEs. But we need to have systems, processes, and procedures in anything we do in a business. Both back to your last question of what we need to be successful and why some companies aren't, is they didn't really have legitimate systems, processes, and procedures to make sure the organization is going forward. And that's the same thing with safety. Systems, processes, and procedures. Sometimes you're driving your car down the road and some of these new cars will have a little monitor that may flash on the dash or make a noise because it seems like maybe you're wobbling the car too much, or in essence, you're going off on the shoulder. So those are systems to help us, and from, in essence, a habit standpoint, do the right thing. So again, a great comment. Someone who lives just in safety would probably give you a much better answer than I would. But I think it starts with attitude. I can have all the systems, process, and procedures in the world, but if my head's not paying attention or I think it's someone else's responsibility, we're going to create lots of problems out there.
You're right on target. It's a great answer, Jeffrey, because there's so many components of it, and it starts and ends at the management levels, and everybody else by osmosis starts to adopt it. I love using the phrase, remember Mr. Peabody in the Wayback Machine, I think, on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show? So if you look back in the past, what mentor do you recall really influenced you the most on your perspectives, including a safety culture? And how do they communicate that to you in a way that it obviously resonated with you?
Again, another great question. You're rapid firing great bullets today here. There are so many ways I could answer that. So whoever's name I use, I'm sure I'm going to leave out some other powerful mentors. But I'm going to answer it a couple ways. One, I think the first mentor I had and didn't realize it was a mentor, it was a teacher, it was a coach, was my first grade teacher, Mrs. Murphy. So this is Murphy's Law from the real Murphy. I spent 2 years in first grade, so nothing I do is very impressive. It's pretty simple. But my first grade teacher engaged me in such a way that I didn't really realize I spent 2 years with either those kindergartners or those first graders, however you want to phrase it. But she set me up for success by realizing what Jeff doesn't understand, we'll do him a disservice by graduating him forward, because then when he doesn't get it and everyone around him does, he's going to probably ask for help. And if he doesn't get it, and if the people around him don't realize he doesn't have it and they don't help him, our natural human behavior is to act up as a small child. And what you're really doing is you're deflecting attention away from that which you're not good at doing. Teachers and parents misread it because then they say, oh, your child's acting up. No. Add 30 years, that's someone in the workplace, which is the same thing. How do we help people? So the first person probably really impressed that upon me is Mrs. Murphy, in the story I just gave, why it's so important to make sure people are always with you, on the bus with you, as Jim Collins would talk about. The second one probably would be one of my K-12 teachers, Mr. Kovar, out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. He was a teacher and a mentor that made his space in the school kind of like the safe haven for those of us that might have been the oddballs out, that could have been the lost souls and students. But he engaged us and he gave us a sense of self, which then you could tie to a sense of something you're good at doing. And then he could champion and spotlight that and advocate for you. So now your passion grew. So I think two of the answers that might be unexpected when you ask that question of adults goes way back, because it had a fundamental foundational imprint of my life. Now, if I jump that forward to work, I've had lots of colleagues and business associates and even individuals from my magazine, Performance Magazine. I've had the honor of interviewing and meeting from, Richard Branson to the last 4 presidents of the United States, to first ladies, to tribal Indian chiefs, to, and you're from the Indian tribe there in North Dakota. Remind me?
Yeah, I'm Blackfoot.
There you go. So again, it's the heritage of our ancestors, as they say. So there's so many ways it's such a great question. Thank you for asking. But how I would coach our viewers is those people that have made an imprint on you, that's legacy. Yes. And so what do you do to transfer that and pass that to the next person so that you're a legacy imprint on them, whether it's from a leadership standpoint, growing and succession conversations, the next generation of leaders in your business, and thinking 2 and 3 and 4 levels deep. I talk about the concept in my leadership report called the Horizon Report, which gives you a way to look at every person in your organization and where do they play on this playing board, chessboard of the future of life in your company, and where do they want to go? Again, simple question you've posed. I think there's profound ways that anyone could answer that. So beyond those two, I'm not going to name drop in my adult life people, but I will name drop back in my first 18 years of life. Again, I had my high school cross country coach. He made a comment to me, Jeff, if you really want to see who you're going to be in life, leave Colorado to go to college. Do not stay in Colorado where most everyone goes to college.
Okay.
Don't go to college necessarily so far away, but you want to go to college far enough away that you can't come home easily on the weekend. And what he was getting at is that what he had seen in his 30 years of teaching, which was profound, is that all of the students that basically stayed in state to go to college don't go very far in life.
So
if you leave here right out of high school, you're going to have to learn how to stand really on your own, and you're not going to be able to come home easily for help. And you'll start to really push to grow yourself to see who you're going to be. Now, you may come back to Colorado 10 years or 20 years from now, but you're going to be a significantly better, different person. So that's another way of looking at how people have had an impact and imprint on who we are.
That's a great thought, because I recall when I graduated high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I kind of mucked around with jobs for about 2 years before I went to college. And I got to be candid, Jeffrey, the way I approached college was totally different than the majority of my classmates. They rolled in right out of high school. A lot of them were from the local areas, and they didn't seem to have much skin in the game, to say. A couple more questions. Before I get there, we got to have a little update here. I think you have a very incredible boot camp leadership summit. Am I capturing those thoughts correctly? Is it next week?
You are. Wasn't expecting that question or topic. So to keep my answer evergreen to you and our viewers, so this video lives on forever. On my website, jefferymagee.com, on the top dashboard, there's events. And I occasionally do put on some public open enrollment events here in Las Vegas. So if you're in town, great. If you're flying into town or want to come to town, that's where you can find out what I'm doing next. And so in the spirit of that, on December 17th and 18th, yes, right here in Las Vegas, I'm going to do my 2-day sales mastery, performance-driven selling boot camp. This is the same 2-day program that my corporate clients and military recruiters invest a significant amount of money to have me come in and deliver to their organization. And I'm doing it as an open enrollment to the public program for individuals, or businesses can bring people in, because what I've learned, and COVID has validated it, there's really not very many or very good options out there for sales training to help people to brush up on their skill sets strategically and tactically, or if they're new into sales, to have some strategy and technique given to them so they have a game plan of how to sell, how to find prospects, engage those people, how to look at customers, grow those accounts, how to deal with objections and no, and all of the components, what's the psychology of the sales process, whether it's B2C, B2B, online, face-to-face. And so I'm doing that, and even more so now, Michael, I think with COVID and 2020, a lot of people need to recognize that you may have a great deliverable, but if your sales skills are not at the championship professional level, you're in deep trouble in 2020, and 21 is not going to be any different. So that's why I'm doing that program. And so if anyone wants to know more about it, they can check out my website. They can send you or I an email, and we'll connect them to the group that's hosting it.
I definitely want to give everybody a shout out, because that's an amazing program. Feedback I've had from participants, the best way I can do it is wow, with a whole series of explanation points. You kind of recalibrated their brain on how to do it. So you got to go check this out. So kind of get towards the tail end of the Q&A, if you will. So if you had an organization and they are maybe concerned where their safety culture's at, or they want to make sure they're kind of have the right trajectory, if you will, what's the number one place you think they should start on safety culture to look at themselves?
We're all familiar with kind of like checklist concepts: grocery list, checklist, to-do list. If you're, fitness buff or trying to get into shape, there's always going to be a checklist. So I think the starting point is to create your checklist if you don't have one. If you do have one, you look at that checklist, do an audit and see, are we really doing it? If you don't have a checklist, again, viewers, I think you need to reach out to Michael right here. He's your great starting point for that checklist. If you don't have one, and if you do, he's a perfect checklist. I mean, you're the professional in this. So with that said, because that's kind of a macro cop out of an answer, checklist. But I really do. I think the answer is, the challenge. If I had a business, back to the question, I would challenge myself and everyone on my team. I'd have a meeting just on this topic. And I would challenge all of us to create our list of what are the top things, and not necessarily need a number, but what are the top things you do right now, but maybe don't even realize it, to make sure you come to work safe and go home safe. I think it's one of the core objectives in business when you look at the safety side of the component is that what do I do to create an environment so the people that work for me, that are part of this organization, our family, what do I do to make sure they come to work healthy and alive and safe? And therefore, the entire journey or experience of this day, what do I make sure we do so that they're able to go home safe and healthy? So there's a checklist. I mean, making sure if you've got water on the floor, I mean, how do you address making sure that water is not there? Or if it has to be there, what do you do to make sure it's safe water? Because you got safety mats, and sometimes you do step in to clean your shoes, and what's the next place you step to dry? I mean, everything you do. So I think we start with what do you do before you worry about anyone else. And that's the problem in leadership and management, society and politics and media and everyone else. It's always a finger pointing game without anyone recognizing, hey, start looking back here first. So what do I do? What can I do is the second question. So first, I'd challenge everyone just to recognize, what is you already doing? Let's celebrate the fact we're probably doing a ton and didn't realize it. But once we're now consciously aware of it, then we can do it on purpose, not action. Then add to the list, what else could we do? Quick example. A lot of businesses in February, March, when COVID started to become a reality at some level, so I won't even give my opinion on this topic, started recognizing what can we do to make this a safe culture? What do we do to mask ourselves? There's no mask available, so we order a bunch of bandanas and people wear those until we get masks. We have hand sanitation and watering and soap up and wash hands everywhere, and we do all that inside the business. But I remember having a conversation with one of my larger clients in April, February, March, April. So right now, when it hit, and I said, you're doing everything right. But here's the problem. Very few people are testing positive for COVID. And even 9 months into COVID, very few people are testing positive for COVID where they're getting it at work. They're getting it at home. They're getting it on their personal time. So I said, you have all these signs that welcome people to work, and here's everything we're doing to make this safe when you come in or clock in or walk in. But reverse it. You need to put some huge signs on your parking lot as people leave. It says, hey, you just had a great safety day. You and I and we did everything we could do to make this safe. Remember, safety doesn't stop as you drive out of the parking lot.
Absolutely.
Play safe at home. If you don't know people, keep your distance. If you don't know them, keep your mask on. If you don't know them and you're with anyone, make sure you sanitize. Maybe it's overkill, but again, I go into the grocery store and get something. I'm doing this when I get into my car. If I go get the mail, maybe that's overkill. But if I have 4 or 5 stops outside of where I work or live, when I come, I'm doing this constantly. So, all of us, when you think about safety, back to us, everyone carries their hand sanitizer. That's a part of your body. Everyone has their mask. It's a part of their body. It's kind of like, you might leave and forget your kids, but man, I'm not forgetting my mask.
Better fit your mask. And I agree with you. There's all the politics side of it. I view it very simple. If it helps make it a little bit safer, and to me, just as important, Jeffrey, if it helps a small business stay open and you wear a mask, let's just kind of help everybody get through it. We're getting towards the tail end, and just a quick discussion. You've heard Jeffrey talk about communication, what he does in his workshops, everybody understanding. Our friends of the Gallup poll, I love Gallup polls. It's all the data. Employee disengagement costs millions of dollars a week in the U.S. economy to businesses. The people that, the drill, they come in late, they leave early, and they can't wait for lunch. That's the biggest challenge. Okay, I got one more question for you, and we're going to get towards the tail end. Anytime I'm with Dr. Jeffery Magee, the time flies by. So here's your last one for you, boss. And it's kind of ironic. So you're going to be in a big room in front of a lot of people. And I know that's never happened to you. And by the way, he's a certified speaking professional, so he's had thousands. So, and it's everybody from that leader to maybe a new safety manager to new staff. What's 2 or 3 things that you'd want to make sure they remember when they walk out of the room on the importance of their safety culture at their company?
I think, again, it's going to go back to the theme of what we've been talking about. I think one is going to be everything starts with you. You control your decisions. We have to realize that all of the influences in our life, all the people in our life, all of our experience in our life shapes that internal dialogue that we have, whether it's positive or negative or self-doubt or optimistic. So I think, one, I would challenge people to recognize everything starts with you. Lack of doing something is an action, and there are ramifications and accountability and responsibilities to that. And success is about abundance mentality. And I think 2020 has really demonstrated in lots of ways pessimism, pragmatism, optimism, abundance mentality. If you have an abundance mentality mindset, that's going to also go back to answer your question of number one, because if I have an abundance mentality, I'm going to limit my exposure to naysayers, pessimists, whiners, people that bitch for a living and they just multiply every day. Versus I'm going to be more, attracted to other solution-oriented people, entrepreneurs, yes people, in terms of yes, we can do it. Let's find a way through it. So one, I think the first thing I'd want the audience to understand is whatever the specific messages I've shared that day, what's my personal takeaway and how do I apply it? And I would have spoken to that in lots of ways during the audience. But I think one is we need more personal responsibility, people to stand up and start calling out BS where it is, holding people accountable. Again, it's not about being disrespectful, but I think there's a lot of critical conversations we need to be having today with ourselves, with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, with our coworkers, with our employees, and et cetera. So that's one. The second takeaway from a safety standpoint, so that one would apply. That second is, again, what is the smallest thing being a very probably ineffective word to be using. What's the smallest effort? What's the smallest activity? What's the smallest technology? What's the smallest piece of hardware, software? What's the smallest element in your universe as a peer at work, as a manager, supervisor, lead, director, vice president, president, C-suite owner? I would say, what's the smallest thing that you probably wouldn't recognize that if it went wrong, we may not be in business tomorrow? And I think those are the two elements from a safety standpoint. One, look in the mirror, and safety is not necessarily about the big obvious things. Wow, you're driving that forklift. Here's something one of my clients taught me recently, because I don't necessarily live in safety. So this would be something you safety people, you're going to laugh at my next statement, because you should laugh because it's an obvious to you. But the point is, it may not be an obvious to the other people in the company. So driving that forklift, I'm thinking the blades are in front of me. Let's go. That's the front. Whoa, that's the most dangerous way to drive it when you're coming around corners. The blade should be behind you if they're not up, because you can come around and you could take someone out and hurt them or kill them. So that was one simple thing I learned with one of my clients just during COVID, where one of the supervisors, 2 levels up from the employee, was sharing that with me as they're rewriting their safety codes, their safety handbook. So everyone knows that, because that's a job that has a lot of turnover in their facility. Yes. So someone new comes in, they need to understand that. So that's an example of something small that can have lots of ramifications, from an injury of someone, poking a hole in a wall, hitting a gas line, electrical line, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's the smallest thing we actually need to start thinking about, not the obvious things, not the big things.
Excellent. Jeffery Magee, Dr. Magee, we always call you Jeffrey. We can't thank enough. Before you leave us, just what I kind of learned is that you got to make sure you have a business plan for your organization. If you have one, make sure it's still current, it's accurate. You probably want to pulse it every couple of years, maybe annually. If you don't have one, that's probably why you're in trouble now. So that should kind of go on the front end of your list. Obviously, if you get a hold of Jeffery Magee and his team, they're going to be able to help you solve that. Part of from the culture, on the safety culture perspective, is the attitude of the person walking in the room, starting with the leader down to the newest member of the staff. Accountability for your actions. You have to own it. And sometimes it may be a little painful, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a lot better off. And it's reinforced, you control your decisions. No one else. And unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily seem to be in vogue right now, but I'm old school and I'm right on target with you.
Bingo.
And I really like your discussion. You focus on the small ones, right? In the world of safety, well, what could blow up and kill 1,000 people? That's important. But what's some of those small ones? Because those impacts can be just as dire for the individual, the recipient of that target, the target of the injury who got hurt, their coworkers, their extended families. And so those are great thoughts. Before we close out, I want to thank you so much for being with us, Jeffrey. It is an honor to have you with us. Is there any final thoughts on your end, sir?
I'm not going to add to any of the questions you've posed. You've done a masterful job, and thank you. If I shared some thoughts that can help you and the viewers, we've all done our job. But safety impacts us at home, when we're walking across this parking lot, when we're driving our car, when we're with our friends or family, when you're out drinking, and when you're out eating, when you're out exercising. Safety is not just an office conversation that we primarily had here. Safety is an attitude. Safety is a point of mindset. Safety is a part of our DNA, whether safety is your title or not.
Well, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this episode of Safety Culture Solutions. I got to thank our featured guest, Dr. Jeffery Magee, once again for being on the show and sharing his valued insight and expertise. He's got passion, and that's part of the reason I'm just so impressed with this guy. As a reminder, please select the subscribe, like, and share buttons. These podcasts can also be found on the Safety Culture Solutions website, as well as for Safety Culture Strategies, www.scstrat.com. By the way, it should come as no surprise that the topic of leadership is going to be touched upon from many different perspectives in numerous episodes. After all, the leaders of a company set the overall tone and expectations. And in closing, reminds me of a quote by J. Paul Getty: "The employer generally gets the employees he deserves." Until next time, wishing you all the best with your safety culture journey. Have a great day.